Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Jules, here for WhatCulture.com, joined by Scott Telford. And
Hi.
This isn't actually a news piece because today we're going to be talking about politics in video games. Now, don't go thinking that we're going to be jumping on either side, but yeah, a bit awkward, but we do just want to talk about how the fact that there does seem to be a lot of titles in the mainstream video game media that basically, they push hard with what you consider to be quite a political subject. Let's take Far Cry 5 as an example of that. It came out with people who basically were religious zealots. They were very, very like Bible Belt America and quite aggressive, staunchly defending that. Yet the developers came out and said, we're not actually trying to draw any real life parallels.
See, they came out and did this later. Now, all of this comes from a very in-depth report over at Polygon. Now, I know Polygon are obviously very much associated with like the leftist view of the games industry.
Yeah.
And whatever. We're kind of just going to go with just a conversation, and wherever it lands, let it be. But yes, Far Cry 5, when they initially started showing it off, creative director Dan Hay would do big talks with industry, with publishers and journalists and stuff, also journalists, where he would basically just do like presentations like, look, this is what it's like. This game is about living in America. It's about pressure. It's about feeling like you can't trust the political spectrum.
I mean, he made it very clear that we could draw parallels to current day political events, like if you wanted to.
And then it was like the nearer you got to release, the more you started to see those things like start to be more spaced out. And then the game itself released and was like, yes, about that, like in terms of imagery, but like the way Far Cry 5 goes, not to get like full spoilers, but is ridiculous. It's got more in common with zombie fiction in terms of, and you could still draw that parallels to like how
it's very interesting how the message came out when the game was announced that this would basically be a current take, a more sort of like mirrored look at society in a more sort of hyperbolic way. Like it was over the top, it was meant to be, but you could definitely draw parallels. But as the game got closer to release, everyone started just going on the Ubisoft development team, actually started going like, no, this is actually just a work of fantasy. It's just a video game, which is totally true. It is just a work of fantasy.
But there's a lot of imagery, there's a lot of iconography in there that you can draw parallels to, and that's the crux of the argument. The thing that Polygon sort of posited is that they've looked into the idea that like political messaging and political posturing is part of a marketing spin.
Yes.
Which we're going to sort of pick that apart, but that's a hell of a thought, especially in today's world, because there are so many ways that you can frame a message, and it'll be immediately picked up by the right, the left, whatever. And that's interesting to pick apart.
Well, what's interesting is that a lot of video game developers go for this sort of broad spectrum of, we want our game to appeal to the mass majority. They want it to appeal to everyone to pick it up. Yet, in order to get interest, they have to have a kind of inflammatory subject matter to get people's attention. Far Cry 5 is just one example, but there are many, many more. But it's one of those things where once they've done that and they've got the hooks in with people saying, okay, that's fine, we'll play this game because of the fact it looks like it's going to challenge me, or it's got like a female lead in a non-female thing, or something like that, they'll suddenly just be like, well, actually, no, we want all of the guys to play this. And recent point is that again, to use Far Cry 5, I will move on from this, is that they did actually come out and say, like, we don't want to discriminate against anyone's religious beliefs. Now, the cult that is in Far Cry 5 are akin to white supremacists.
They're definitely akin, even though they would say that they're
what that is saying to a lot of people when Ubisoft comes out with this sort of statement is, you don't want to discriminate against Nazis and Nazism and stuff like that. Like but that's how it gets blown out of proportion. It's basically like media spin, but they don't care. They're making money because anyone took controversy as cash.
Yes, and that's the push and pull. It's like they want to embrace the riskiness. They want to embrace the stuff that is more relevant in the moment, and it gets them all the headlines. And it's like, oh my god, they're actually going to tackle this thing. And we'll move on to the Division 2 in a second. But when it gets nearer to release, like that seems to be the thing that Polygon highlights, is you've got this constant push and pull between the creatives and the business side of things. Because the more you embrace the risky stuff, the more you get the headlines, the more you get the hype, but the more they still have to deliver on a profitable product. And then you have all the number crunchers being like, no, we need to smooth this over. You need to sell to everybody, or you need to try and sell to everybody. And they talked about they've had quotes from big publishers that basically think of all games as just fun, and it's like,
but they're not anymore.
Exactly.
Like, we're moving into this battlefield effectively where games are meant to be fun, but they come with real-world responsibilities.
Oh, they can anyway.
They can. And the thing is that there's two sides to every coin, and there's some people that just want to say, right, we're making a dumb game for dumb people, and it's going to be really, really silly. And then there's other people like, like Last of Us and things like that say we're trying to create stories, narratives. But as soon as you use that word in there, you then put your piece of media up for the same critiques as art, as film, music, and you have to be judged by those same criteria, which is, does it reflect society's problems? Does it have a message that it's trying to say? Is it actually offensive to some people?
I think those things, like for me, it's always like, just personally, it's always going to come down to intent and context.
Yeah.
But something like Detroit Become Human, like that game, I mean, I like the way that thing plays out on a pure beat-to-beat storytelling level.
Yeah.
But narratively, that thing pulls like from so much like incendiary imagery and iconography. Like,
I mean, it tackles racism, sexism, sort of like
social identity politics, like
sexual slavery and stuff like that, and all the weird stuff that's going on.
Like abuse as well.
Abuse. And then the developers came out and just said, like, nah, it's just a story about androids. I'm sorry, you can't say that. You get to a point where it's just like, yes, it is a story about androids. It wouldn't matter if it was a story about aliens. It wouldn't matter, like, the context of what you are saying is very real.
And the thing is, like, that gets into, like, you can get lost in the weeds of intent and context, but in David Cage's specific case with Detroit, he's literally pulling from very real world things, like the androids only travel at the back of the bus. The symbols that they wear on their clothing is very similar to what concentration camps they would brand Jews and stuff. Like, it's very incendiary imagery and things that he wants to trade off. But then when you start picking it apart, he's like, no, it's just the androids. Don't worry, I'm not making a statement. It's like, yes, you are.
And that's the problem, is that if you have this desire to use this popularized iconography, this very real stuff, and then just go like, actually, nah, it's not like that, you come across as non-committal. And if you come across as non-committal, then why should we care about the message that you're saying? If anything, it cheapens the message that you're trying to put across. If you're saying androids sit at the back of the bus, like we have with the famous Rosa Parks things going on, like, how can you say that they aren't similar in fashion, and then just go like, actually, no, they're just androids? Aren't you just saying that therefore you're diminishing?
Like,
you know what I mean? It's a sticky subject to talk about, because even speaking to you guys now about it, it's hard to convey in a clear and balanced way. Like, I don't want to come across like I fully admit I'm quite liberal. I'm sure that most people.
I'm more liberal, but I guess I'd be more in the middle. I like just having conversations, and wherever things lie, whatever, I don't care.
So it's actually good that we're having this type of conversation, because we don't have all of the same views about stuff.
No,
I get a bit inflamed about this sort of thing.
As rightly you should, but that's the thing. That like level of like getting enraged about something or getting passionate about something is potentially what they're trading off.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the thing to be addressed. Is like how much our marketing teams and how much our developers and publishers aware that, you know, very much in the Western world, identity politics and general politics and the way people live, it's very much split. You kind of identify with one or the other. Obviously, there's a burgeoning middle.
Yeah.
But like, you know, the left and right get a hell of a lot more coverage, and they're aware of that. It's a marketable, tappable thing, and that's the crux of the report. That's the crux of the thing. Like, how much are they going to put a game out there that they know is going to get the leftists riled up or the right people riled up?
Whereas what you're saying is that the way that most games are doing is that they'll reel over their thing, hook into either one side, pull it closer to the middle, and just go, there you go.
Yes, and then the closer you get to release, the more like it seems to be that the business mentality comes in and goes, hey, all this stuff that you guys, all these people that you riled up, that's not okay anymore. Like, yeah, you've got the hype, but you still need to deliver on the product, and we see everything get smoothed out again. Like I said, David Cage just went, oh no, it's just about androids.
And developers they want to keep their jobs.
Exactly.
Like this is the thing. I know that if I was making a game and I was not part of an independent thing, I was actually part of a bigger sort of publishing house. And I put up this thing, they said, that's brilliant, Jules, like this idea of like, you know, a plucky whatever who's fighting against the system.
Plucky bald man with a beard.
Yeah, plucky bald man, we're underrepresented in gaming, we are. Basically, like, that story comes along, and as they say, okay, you can make it however you want to make it. You can put whatever story you go into it. And like, brilliant. But as soon as it gets there, they go, actually, you're going to have to say that you're going to distance yourself from that immediacy of it, because this is going to piss a lot of people off.
Yeah.
Then why accept my idea in the first place?
Exactly. And that again goes back into the reality of making something for mass consumption. And obviously we talked about this in another video, which I actually forget the name of, but that whole push and pull between creativity and business.
Right.
And video games, for the most part, are a business. That goes back to the publisher's way of thinking of it, that it's just a product, it's just fun. So Nintendo used to think of their games too. But it goes back and forward. And one of the things that Polygon found out talking to dev teams is that on the inside, obviously everybody remains anonymous in the report.
Yeah.
On the inside, some creatives are completely behind, would back the messages in their games. Other people just see it as a game. They just see it as something that is fun.
Yeah.
And that's those contrasting, clashing mentalities are what's going forward. I think that factors into the debate that's been raging since 2013 as to like whether games are art. I would always say they are.
Yeah.
Like, for me, art is something.
I mean, I think that they are full.
Yeah, totally. I mean, mean, I did a whole 12,000 word thing on how I had to define art, and it was fun. But like art is something is expression created with intent, whatever. But that all goes into that, the maturation of the medium overall, and they're gonna the industry seems to have tapped onto the fact that they can create games with very specific messages, very specific real world parallels. To go back to The Division 2, it's about tackling a corrupt government immediately.
Yeah, how could you not see that as a sort of thing going?
True, but then my immediate thing goes to we're assuming a level of intent. You can point to things,
and to be honest, I'm going to counter my own point, which is that we've played games like this way before. We played games in the arcade. You'd be for example, look at Contra or something like that. Are you going to say that that's actually symbolic of taking on a higher power or something like you could look at games in so many ways and read into the subtext of them. However, I just think that there are some games like The Division 2 where they openly state this is Washington DC. They openly state that you're taking on the US government. That you kind of be like, I wonder if they're talking about taking on the US government.
And it's for now they would be, or they potentially will be as part of the marketing. To go back to something like Deus Ex Mankind Divided, they literally used the term mechanical apartheid. You're bringing in one of the worst historical things. It's at what point are we going to have things? Well, we might have things like the Holocaust or 9/11 or horrible things that have very like I said, incendiary connotations for the sake of a marketing spin. Yeah. Yes, it gets a lot of interest in headlines, but then when it comes to the game coming out, the result is that there's Far Cry 5. There's no meaningful takeaway from that. Mankind Divided had nothing to say.
It seems to be kind of like a paper shield defense, doesn't it?
Kind of.
They put it up and they just say look, this is just a game.
Yeah.
But the thing is they're if you are basing your stuff, if you're using these words, if you're using these images that we were saying before, then you open yourself up to real world criticism. So I just think that it's a fantastically brilliant marketing ploy, but it's also kind of really the dirtiest thing going on,
absolutely, which I think is why it's worth talking about, because obviously at this stage you see politics left, right and centre on Twitter. They're everywhere, personal politics or just politics in general, infiltrate everything from the Marvel movies to anything, and they're everywhere. But I do think it is worth talking about on a pure, if you've grown up with gaming level, because you see how the industry has changed, you see the things that they've embraced, you see the debates like the art thing, and it's okay, cool, we're maturing, we're growing as a medium. Yes, you can still have very basic games, really simplistic things, I don't know, whatever, things that don't have to have wider stories. But if we're going to go there, what does that mean? And you can start picking it apart. We don't have to draw conclusions. That's not why we did the video.
No.
But it's worth picking apart.
Yeah, it's worth making people aware of the games they're playing and the sort of context that they're playing it in. I mean, if you want to look at examples, this has been going on for years. This isn't a new trend. I mean, if you want to go way back, you probably go back to our childhood, and I was just thinking of an example of Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, Sonic the Hedgehog is a 2D platformer that many of us grew up with, but you could easily just say it's a thing about environmentalism. You could say about capturing animals, experimenting on them, the spread of man in the world. There are very
that's a great example, because Sonic, the creator of Sonic, actually literally came out and said it is about environmentalism. There we go. So, but that message was way more hidden in the game, and only something that the creator then put out, as opposed to marketing it, trading off it, all that kind of stuff. If Sonic came out today, who's to say that messaging might not be front and center in the marketing?
So maybe that's the one thing that's changed. Maybe the fact that games in the old didn't trade off of what their subtext and controversy was, and nowadays it's almost you won't get noticed unless you have something that will trigger something.
Which I think goes wider into the whole way that we consume media, social media, Twitter and all that kind of stuff. You're looking for likes, retweets and shares and all that kind of thing. So they're trying to grab headlines. But the business reality is always there. The industry is older than the social media side of things. So that always has to come back alongside it.
I do often think that there's a war within the publishing houses, between the marketing department and the actual games CEOs and stuff like that. Because they're saying the marketing department's any publicity is good publicity. It doesn't matter if we offend people, let's just get out there and just get our boots on the ground. Whereas everyone else is just going this is going to affect sales. We don't want to let's put out a carbon copy message that says we respect the views of every single person that works here, blah 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 blah.
And it's the one of the things that it goes back to the original source of the report. Something like Polygon would be more than happy championing I guess what I would call the leftist agenda, whatever the hell you want to call it. Everyone knows that Polygon are associated with more leftist mentalities, if you want to call them that. And so they would be happy going with that, and they're not necessarily as bothered about going down the central road or the right kind of thing. But if you're running a business and you're tackling something that's going to make that much money, you have to consider those other things. And it's always going to go back and forward. But Polygon was saying, why don't games take more of a stance? And it's because it's because of the financial risk.
That's just it comes down to that. It comes down to, once more, ethics versus money, and money will win. That's how it is. I mean, this thing, we work for a company and we have to try and balance our views. We don't go out and say exactly what we think on every single video about
Shovel Knight is the best game in the world.
Well,
mate.
I mean, that's not politics, is it?
Well, I can make it politics. I identify as Shovel Knight.
But you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
we try to keep a balance for you as much as we can. I know that we do slip sometimes, but we do try, because we know that our stuff is being consumed by people of every walk of life.
Yeah.
And we want that to be an open discussion. We don't want to just cater for one side of people, because you end up not having a conversation in those situations. If you are basically only having a conversation with people who already follow the same mentality, then how are you ever furthering any discussion?
Well, exactly, and that's the way that we tend to live, and it's definitely the way that I kind of carry myself. Hence why when you said, like, what do I align with?
Yeah.
I try not to. I just try to have conversations with whoever the hell I want, whether that's people with older generations or anyone.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, that stuff, I always think that having the conversation is the most interesting thing.
But that leads me to my final point, which is, what do you think about this? Let us know down in the comment section below about your opinions on politics in games. Do you think that they're too obtuse? Do you think that they're too in your face? Just let us know. We'd be very interesting to hear all of that. And keep it safe, keep it calm. As always, I've been Jules.
I've Scott.
You've been awesome, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye.
Bye.